Your soulmate's honest words about marriage left a deep impression. You were never supposed to hear these words. Not today. Not this way. Yet something has quietly pulled you here, as if an invisible hand knew there was a truth your heart had been waiting to discover. For so long, you have searched for signs, questioned your timing, and wondered if the love you carried so deeply was leading you somewhere real or simply teaching you another painful lesson. But what if someone connected to your destiny has finally spoken the truth they kept hidden from everyone, and what they admitted about marriage has the power to change everything you thought you knew? You have probably imagined what they would say if fear no longer stood between you. Would they confess that they still think about you? Would they admit they made mistakes? Or would they reveal something so unexpected that it would leave you speechless? The strange part is that their most honest words were never about romance alone. They were about something much deeper. They were about commitment, forever, and the quiet promise of building a life beside someone who truly feels like home. And once those words escaped their heart, they could never take them back. For a long time, they convinced themselves marriage was only a destination, a title, a ceremony people celebrated for a single day before life returned to normal. They watched relationships rise and fall. They saw promises broken and dreams disappear. Somewhere along the way, they stopped believing forever could be real. They smiled when others talked about soulmates, but inside they quietly questioned whether lasting love actually existed. Then something unexpected began happening, and every belief they had carefully built started to crack. It didn't happen all at once. It arrived through moments that seemed too ordinary to matter. A quiet evening filled with silence. A family laughing together across a dinner table. An elderly couple walking hand in hand without saying a word. Those simple scenes stirred something inside them that refused to stay asleep. For the first time, they stopped asking whether marriage was worth believing in and started asking who they wished to share that kind of life with. One answer appeared again and again, no matter how hard they tried to ignore it. That answer surprised them because it carried your presence. Your kindness echoed in memories they thought had faded. Your patience returned in conversations they replayed late at night. Even the little things they once overlooked suddenly became impossible to forget. The way you listened. The way you understood without demanding explanations. The way you brought peace instead of pressure. They realized those were not ordinary qualities. Those were the quiet foundations of the future they secretly longed for, yet one fear continued holding them back. Fear has a powerful voice. It whispers that love can disappear without warning. It reminds people of every disappointment they've ever survived. It tells them they are safer protecting their heart than opening it again. Your soulmate listened to that voice for far too long. Every time hope appeared, fear found another reason to retreat. Every time they imagined a future with you, doubt stepped in and asked if they deserved something so genuine. The battle became exhausting, until one unforgettable moment changed the direction of everything. One night, when the world around them had finally become quiet, they found themselves thinking about the future in a way they never had before. Not about success. Not about money. Not about achievements. They imagined waking up years from now beside someone whose presence brought peace even during life's hardest seasons. They imagined growing older without pretending to be someone else. They imagined a love that didn't disappear when life became difficult. And without forcing the thought, your face gently entered that vision, leaving them unable to explain why. That realization didn't make everything easy. In fact, it made everything more complicated. Because once your heart recognizes what it truly wants, pretending becomes almost impossible. They tried distracting themselves. They buried themselves in responsibilities. They convinced themselves enough time had passed. Yet every path they chose somehow circled back to the same question. What if the person they were searching for had already entered their life? And they almost let that miracle slip away. You may have noticed unusual shifts inside yourself too. Perhaps you've become calmer after months of emotional storms. Perhaps you've stopped chasing answers that once consumed every thought. Maybe you've started trusting that what belongs to you will never require you to lose yourself. That quiet transformation was not meaningless. While you believed you were simply healing, your energy was changing. Your heart was becoming strong enough to receive the kind of love you once begged the universe to send. And somewhere beyond your awareness, they began sensing that change. People often think soulmates are connected only through beautiful moments. But the deepest connections are strengthened through growth, distance, and lessons neither person wanted to learn. Every setback prepared both of you differently. Every delay uncovered hidden fears that needed healing first. Looking back now, they can finally admit something they never understood before. If everything had happened earlier, they might have destroyed the very love they were meant to protect. That realization left them completely humbled, and it led to a confession they never expected themselves to make. They quietly admitted that marriage was never what frightened them. Commitment wasn't the enemy. Forever wasn't the problem. The real fear was choosing the wrong person and spending years wondering what could have been. They carried that fear for so long that they forgot another possibility existed. What if the right person had been standing in front of them all along? What if true peace wasn't something they needed to search for but something they had already experienced whenever they were close to you? Those words stayed with them long after they spoke them aloud. They couldn't escape the weight of their own honesty. Every excuse they once trusted suddenly sounded empty. Every reason they created to maintain distance lost its power. Truth has a strange way of simplifying everything. Once it arrives, complicated stories collapse into quiet certainty. And the certainty growing inside them became impossible to ignore. Even though another unexpected revelation was still waiting, at the same time, life began placing unusual signs in your path. Certain songs appeared at exactly the right moment. Familiar numbers caught your attention again and again. Memories surfaced without warning, carrying emotions that felt both comforting and mysterious. You may have dismissed these experiences as coincidence, but your soul often notices movement before your mind understands it. Something beyond ordinary timing has been quietly arranging pieces neither of you could see, and those pieces are finally beginning to fit together. There is one memory they have never shared with anyone. It seems small from the outside. Yet it became the turning point inside their heart. It was a moment when they saw you simply being yourself. No performance. No expectations. No need to impress anyone. In that ordinary moment, they caught a glimpse of the kind of partner people search their entire lives to find. They didn't recognize its importance back then. Only later did they realize that memory had become the standard against which every future relationship would be measured. That discovery left a deep impression they could no longer silence. They finally understood that marriage isn't built on constant excitement or perfect circumstances. It grows through trust during uncertainty, laughter after difficult days, forgiveness when mistakes happen, and choosing each other even when life becomes unpredictable. Those simple truths reshaped everything they believed about love. And with every new understanding, your place inside their heart became clearer than ever before. Still, destiny rarely unfolds without one final test. Just when clarity arrives, life often asks whether that clarity is strong enough to survive uncertainty. Questions remain unanswered. Timing still feels mysterious. Neither of you can fully see what tomorrow holds. Yet beneath every unanswered question, something powerful continues growing. Hope refuses to disappear. Love refuses to fade. And the invisible thread connecting your journeys grows stronger with every passing moment. Even as one final secret waits in silence, the greatest surprise has never been that your soulmate changed the way they think about marriage. The greatest surprise is why they changed. The answer reaches far beyond romance. It touches every prayer you whispered when no one else could hear, every lesson hidden inside heartbreak, every moment you believed the story had already ended. None of it was wasted. Every chapter carried both of you toward a truth that neither heart was ready to face until now, and just when you believe you finally understand everything, another realization begins to emerge from the shadows. The words that left such a deep impression were only the beginning. There is one sentence they have not spoken aloud, one promise still resting silently inside their heart, waiting for the exact moment destiny decides the silence has lasted long enough, and when that promise is finally revealed, it will change not only the future they imagined, but the future you never dared to imagine for yourself. Stop for just a moment, because what you are about to hear feels like it has. Single thought entered their heart so gently that it could no longer be ignored. What if I was afraid of forever, not because of them, but because of myself? That question echoed through every wall they had built around their emotions. Suddenly, marriage no longer looked like a prison created by fear. It began looking like a promise they had secretly hoped to believe in all along. The fear wasn't about spending forever with you. The fear was about wondering if they deserved a forever that beautiful. And that realization opened a door they never expected to walk through. You have probably noticed strange signs appearing in your own life. Certain numbers seem to repeat everywhere you look. Familiar songs begin playing at unexpected moments. You think about someone just before hearing their name. You wake from dreams that feel more real than your daily routine. Most people call these coincidences. But your soul understands a different language. It recognizes movement before your eyes can see it. Something has been shifting beneath the surface for weeks, and those signs are pointing toward a conversation that has already begun in another heart. Your soulmate has been questioning everything they once believed about commitment. They remembered promises they were afraid to make because they had seen too many promises broken. They carried old disappointments that convinced them lasting love belonged to other people, never to them. Every painful chapter taught them to expect endings instead of beginnings. But healing has a strange way of arriving quietly. It doesn't ask permission. It simply replaces fear with understanding, one heartbeat at a time, until one unexpected memory completely changed their perspective. They remembered the way you made ordinary moments feel meaningful. They remembered how your presence brought peace instead of pressure. They realized they never had to pretend to be someone else around you. In a world where masks became normal, you somehow made honesty feel safe. That realization struck deeper than they expected. It wasn't excitement they felt first. It was regret. Regret for every opportunity they allowed fear to steal. And that regret became impossible to carry without making a decision. The surprising part is that their honest words about marriage were never spoken to impress anyone. They weren't rehearsed. They weren't planned. They escaped during an unexpected conversation when someone asked what they truly wanted from life. After a long silence, they answered with a voice that sounded almost unfamiliar to themselves. I don't want perfection anymore. I just want something real. I want someone whose soul feels like home. Those words shocked even them because, for the first time, they stopped describing an idea and started describing you. Although they didn't say your name aloud, while all of this was happening, your own journey continued shaping you in ways you barely noticed. Every disappointment became another lesson in self-worth. Every lonely evening quietly taught you patience. Every unanswered prayer slowly transformed into inner strength. You stopped chasing people who couldn't recognize your value. You learned that real love never asks you to shrink yourself just to be accepted. Without realizing it, your spirit became brighter. And sometimes the brightest light reaches someone who thought they were living comfortably in darkness. Destiny rarely works through sudden miracles alone. More often, it works through tiny moments that seem completely ordinary until you look back and realize they changed everything. A random conversation. An unexpected message. A familiar place visited at exactly the right time. Life gently arranges pieces long before anyone notices the picture forming. Right now, those pieces are quietly moving into place. Though one important piece is still missing, there is something your soulmate has not confessed to anyone. Every time they imagine the future, your face appears before they can stop it. They tried replacing that image with practical plans, logical decisions, and safer choices. None of it lasted. The image always returned. It wasn't forced. It wasn't imagined. It simply refused to disappear. Eventually they stopped asking why and began asking something much more frightening. What if this is where I'm actually meant to be? That question stayed with them long after the conversation ended, refusing to leave. The truth about marriage became much deeper than rings, ceremonies, or celebrations. They finally understood that marriage isn't simply about sharing a house or signing a document. It is about choosing the same heart over and over again, even after difficult days. It is about becoming a safe place where another soul can rest without fear. It is about growing together instead of growing apart. And when they pictured that kind of future, every road somehow led back to you. Though another challenge was already approaching, not everyone celebrates transformation. Sometimes old fears fight hardest just before they disappear. Doubts returned one last time. Questions resurfaced. What if too much time had passed? What if you had already moved on? What if the opportunity they once ignored had quietly slipped away forever? Those thoughts surrounded them like shadows, trying to convince them that silence was still safer than honesty. Yet every attempt to walk away only strengthened the feeling pulling them back toward you. Meanwhile, something inside your own heart has also been changing. You no longer feel desperate for answers because you've discovered something even more valuable than certainty. You've discovered peace. That peace doesn't mean you've stopped hoping. It means you've stopped believing your happiness depends entirely on someone else's choices. Ironically, the moment you found that quiet confidence became the exact moment your energy shifted. And sometimes the universe responds most powerfully when you finally stop forcing what was always meant to find you. There is a reason every delay has felt so meaningful. Neither of you could have received this connection in the same way months ago. Too much healing remained unfinished. Too many lessons still needed to be learned. Love without wisdom often becomes attachment. But love strengthened by growth becomes something almost impossible to break. Every season of waiting was preparing both hearts for a different version of forever. One built on understanding instead of illusion. Then came the moment neither of you expected. Someone casually mentioned marriage again. This time, your soulmate didn't hesitate. Instead of changing the subject, they smiled softly. Instead of looking uncomfortable, they looked peaceful. And with complete honesty, they quietly admitted something that had been growing inside them for longer than anyone realized. I used to be afraid of forever. Now I'm only afraid of missing the person I'm supposed to spend forever with. The room became silent. No one knew how much those words truly meant, but inside their heart, your name echoed louder than ever. yet the story doesn't end there. Because speaking the truth and acting on the truth are two very different journeys. One requires courage. The other requires surrender. And just when it seems they are finally ready to close the distance, an unexpected event unfolds that neither of you could have predicted. A forgotten secret begins rising from the past. A choice made long ago suddenly returns with incredible force. And as destiny prepares to reveal what has been hidden all along, you are only one heartbeat away from discovering whether these honest words about marriage were the beginning of your forever, or the calm before the greatest emotional turning point of your entire life. You were never supposed to hear these words today. In fact, if everything had gone according to fear instead of destiny, this conversation would have remained hidden forever. But something has shifted beneath the surface of your life. The silence you've been living with is no longer empty. It is carrying an answer that has been traveling toward you for far longer than you realize. And when your soulmate finally speaks honestly about marriage, you don't hear perfect promises. You hear a truth so raw, so unexpected, that it changes everything you thought you understood about love, yet one question still refuses to leave your heart. For a long time, you believed their silence meant uncertainty. You wondered if they were afraid of commitment, afraid of choosing you, or simply afraid of opening a door they weren't ready to walk through. Every unanswered message, every delayed conversation, every moment when hope seemed to fade became another reason to protect your heart. You tried convincing yourself that moving on was the only choice left. But while you were trying to let go, they were quietly wrestling with emotions they didn't know how to explain. And those emotions were leading them toward a realization they could no longer escape. The truth is, marriage was never the part that frightened them. It wasn't the idea of forever. It wasn't sharing a home, building a future, or growing old beside someone. What frightened them was the responsibility of loving someone so deeply that losing them would feel like losing a part of themselves. They carried old disappointments that taught them to expect endings instead of beginnings. Every scar whispered the same warning: don't trust happiness for too long. Yet no matter how hard they listened to those fears, your presence kept interrupting them, and that interruption became impossible to ignore. There was one quiet evening when everything changed. No dramatic event announced it. No miracle appeared in the sky. Instead, they found themselves sitting alone, surrounded by ordinary silence that suddenly felt louder than ever before. Memories they had tried to bury began returning one after another. Your laughter. Your kindness. The way you made them feel seen without asking them to become someone else. Those memories didn't ask for permission. They simply arrived, refusing to leave, until one sentence escaped their heart before they even realized they were speaking it: if I ever get married. I only wanted to feel the way I feel when I think about you. The moment those words left their lips, everything inside them became still. It wasn't a sentence rehearsed for anyone else. There was no audience. No reason to pretend. It was the first completely honest conversation they had ever allowed themselves to have. And once truth is spoken aloud, it becomes almost impossible to hide from it again, even when fear desperately tries to pull it back into darkness. Meanwhile, something inside you had already begun changing. You stopped chasing certainty from other people. You learned how to survive days that once felt impossible. Piece by piece, you rebuilt your confidence after disappointments that almost convinced you love wasn't meant for you. You discovered a quiet strength that didn't need constant reassurance. Without realizing it, your spirit became calmer, wiser, and more grounded. That invisible transformation reached farther than you could imagine, because somehow, your soulmate felt it even from a distance. Have you noticed how certain moments seem strangely meaningful lately? A song appears exactly when you're thinking about them. Their name unexpectedly comes up in conversation. A familiar place suddenly calls your attention. Maybe you've dismissed these moments as coincidence. But what if they aren't random at all? What if life has been gently placing signs in your path because something beneath the surface is beginning to align? The closer two hearts move toward truth, the louder the universe often becomes. Though one sign remains unexplained, your soulmate didn't suddenly become fearless. They still questioned themselves. They wondered whether too much time had passed. They worried that mistakes couldn't be undone. They feared that honesty might arrive too late. Every hopeful thought was followed by another voice reminding them of old failures. Their heart wanted to move forward while their memories begged them to stay where it felt safe. The battle became exhausting, until one unexpected encounter forced them to see themselves differently. Someone asked them a simple question: "What kind of marriage do you actually want?" It sounded ordinary, yet it reached deeper than anyone expected. For a long moment, they couldn't answer. They realized they had spent years avoiding the question instead of exploring it. Then, almost without thinking, they began describing a relationship filled with trust. Laughter, patience, forgiveness, late-night conversations, peaceful mornings, shared dreams, and quiet loyalty. As they spoke, another realization slowly unfolded before them. Every quality they described reminded them of one person, and that realization shook them more than they were prepared for. You. Not because you were perfect, not because your journey had been free from mistakes, but because whenever they imagined a life built on honesty instead of appearances, your face kept appearing in every future they could picture. They tried replacing that image with someone else. It never lasted. They tried convincing themselves it was only nostalgia. But the feeling refused to disappear. Instead, it grew stronger every single time they stopped pretending they didn't care, and that growing certainty began changing every decision they made afterward. At the same time, your own heart was learning one of life's hardest lessons. Real love isn't about rushing destiny. It isn't about forcing answers before they're ready. Sometimes waiting isn't punishment. Sometimes waiting is preparation. Every season that felt empty was quietly teaching you patience, wisdom, and self-respect. Those lessons became part of who you are. Without them, you might have accepted a version of love far smaller than the one your soul truly deserves, but another truth is only beginning to reveal itself. Marriage, your soulmate realized, isn't simply about standing beside someone during beautiful moments. It's about remaining present when life becomes uncomfortable. It's about choosing each other after misunderstandings, disappointments, fears, and uncertainty. It's waking up every morning and deciding that love is still worth protecting, even on ordinary days when no one is watching. That understanding left a deeper impression on them than any romantic fantasy ever could, because suddenly they understood why their feelings for you never disappeared. Then came the dream. They never told anyone about it. It wasn't dramatic. It wasn't filled with impossible miracles. They simply dreamed of walking beside you through an ordinary day. Sunlight entered through familiar windows. Quiet laughter filled the room. Nothing extraordinary happened. Yet when they woke up, they felt an overwhelming peace unlike anything they had experienced in years. For the first time, forever didn't feel frightening. It felt like home, and waking up without that feeling suddenly became the hardest part. Since then, they have begun noticing something impossible to explain. Every attempt to move away emotionally somehow circles back toward you. Every new distraction eventually loses its power. Every carefully constructed excuse begins falling apart under the weight of one undeniable truth. They don't miss an idea of you. They miss the way your presence changed the atmosphere around them. They miss the version of themselves that only seemed to exist when hope was stronger than fear, and they are beginning to wonder if that version of themselves can still be found. But destiny rarely opens every door at once. It reveals one truth, then another, then another. Each revelation asks whether you're willing to trust what cannot yet be fully seen. That is where both of you stand now, not at the end of the journey. Not even at the beginning, but at the quiet place where honesty finally becomes louder than doubt. Though one final confession still remains hidden, because there is something your soulmate has never said out loud, not to family, not to friends, not even to themselves until recently. Every time they imagine saying, "I do," they no longer picture a ceremony. They no longer picture flowers. They no longer picture applause. Instead, they picture looking into your eyes with complete honesty, knowing that after everything life has tested, everything you've both survived, everything that almost pulled you apart, choosing you would be the easiest decision they ever made. But just as they gather the courage to face that truth completely, something unexpected happens. Someone from the past appears without warning. A secret connected to both of your futures begins rising to the surface, and the next word spoken could either unite two destinies forever, or change everything before either of you has the chance to say a single word. Before you click away, you need to hear this because something has shifted beneath the surface of your life, and if you ignore it now, you may miss the meaning of everything your heart has been trying to tell you. For so long, you believed the silence between you and the person meant for your soul had all the answers. You thought distance meant rejection. You thought unanswered questions meant the story had already ended. But what if the silence was never empty? What if it was hiding words that were too honest, too vulnerable, and too life-changing to be spoken until this very moment? Because someone connected to your destiny has finally faced a truth about marriage that they could no longer keep buried, and those words are about to change the way you see everything. You have spent nights wondering if love was supposed to feel this uncertain. You questioned your instincts every time your heart whispered that something deeper was unfolding behind the scenes. Logic told you to move on. Time told you to stop looking back. Yet something inside you refused to let go completely. It wasn't obsession. It wasn't wishful thinking. It was the quiet feeling that a chapter had been paused instead of finished. That feeling has stayed with you because your spirit recognized a connection your eyes could not yet see, and now the hidden reason is beginning to reveal itself. While you were trying to understand your own emotions, your soulmate was fighting a battle no one else knew existed. They smiled when they needed to. They carried on with life. They convinced everyone around them that they had everything under control. But every quiet evening became another conversation with themselves. Every peaceful moment became another reminder that pretending was becoming harder than telling the truth. They realized they weren't running away from another person. They were running away from the future they secretly wanted, and that realization terrified them more than anything. Marriage wasn't just a word to them. It carried memories, fears, promises, and invisible scars that reached back much farther than you ever imagined. They had seen relationships fall apart. They had watched trust disappear. They had witnessed dreams collapse under the weight of disappointment. Somewhere along the way, they convinced themselves that loving deeply meant risking everything. So instead of moving toward commitment, they built walls around their heart, believing those walls would protect them. But walls don't only keep pain out. They also keep love from getting in, until one unforgettable moment changed everything. It happened so quietly that they almost missed it. There was no dramatic music. No perfect sunset. No miracle that stopped the world. Instead, there was a simple moment when they imagined their future without you. For the first time, they truly let themselves picture a life where your presence disappeared forever. Instead of relief, they felt an emptiness so deep it echoed through every part of them. That silence became louder than every excuse they had ever created. And suddenly, the future they feared wasn't marriage anymore, it was the possibility of never sharing life with you. At first, they resisted the feeling. They tried to convince themselves it would pass. They distracted themselves with work, responsibilities, and endless routines. But the heart has a language that cannot be silenced forever. Every distraction eventually led back to the same place. Every path circled back to your memory. Every attempt to forget only reminded them how impossible forgetting had become. They began asking themselves questions they had avoided for months, maybe even years, and the answers surprised them more than the questions ever could. they finally admitted something they had never spoken out loud. The fear wasn't about marriage itself. The fear was about whether they could be enough for someone they truly loved. Deep inside, they worried they would disappoint you. They worried they would repeat mistakes they had witnessed growing up. They worried they would lose themselves while trying to protect someone else's happiness. Those fears felt so real that they disguised themselves as certainty. But fear has a strange habit of pretending to be wisdom, until honesty shines a light on it. As those hidden fears began losing their power, another truth quietly stepped forward. They realized every meaningful future they imagined somehow included you. Whether they pictured laughter during ordinary mornings, difficult seasons that required strength, or peaceful evenings filled with simple conversations, your presence kept appearing. They tried removing you from those dreams, but every version felt incomplete. It wasn't because life depended on you. It was because their heart had already chosen you long before their mind was willing to admit it. Yet one final confession remained locked away: you may have noticed changes within yourself too. You have grown stronger through disappointments that once seemed impossible to survive. You learned how to stand alone without losing hope. You discovered that healing isn't forgetting. Healing is remembering without breaking apart. Every challenge shaped you into someone capable of receiving a deeper kind of love instead of settling for temporary comfort. Without realizing it, you became the very person your soulmate needed to meet again, but they didn't know if they deserved that chance. Destiny rarely rushes. It waits until both hearts have learned lessons they could not have understood any other way. You may have mistaken delays for rejection, but delays often become protection in disguise. If two people meet before they are ready, fear speaks louder than love. If they meet after growth has done its quiet work, every conversation carries new meaning. The waiting you once resented may have been preparing both of you for a truth that could only be received now, and that truth was finally ready to be spoken. One evening, they stopped arguing with themselves. They stopped searching for reasons to stay emotionally distant. They stopped pretending that time alone would erase what they felt. Instead, they sat quietly with their own thoughts and asked the question they had avoided for so long. If fear disappeared today, what would I really want? The answer came almost immediately. It wasn't complicated. It wasn't dramatic. It was painfully simple. They wanted a future where love wasn't something they escaped. They wanted a future where marriage meant building a life instead of fearing one, and your name was the first thought that entered their heart. Those honest words left a deep impression on them because they came from a place they had hidden even from themselves. They whispered, "I don't want a perfect relationship. I want a real one. I don't need someone who never makes mistakes. I need someone who stays when life becomes difficult. I don't want to spend my life wondering what could have been. I want to build something that lasts." After saying those words, they realized they had unknowingly been describing you all along. Yet another unexpected realization followed close behind. They remembered moments you probably considered ordinary. The conversations that felt effortless. The times you listened without judgment. The quiet encouragement you offered when nobody else noticed. The kindness you showed without expecting.